This is Tyler, your antisocial critic and the host of the AntiSocial Network, your number one source for anachronistic conversations online. Come join us each week to hear opinions from some of the best voices discussing entertainment, politics, religion, and modern life on the internet today, most of which you've never heard of, but I have. This week on Groupthink Theology, we're joined by Hector, who is the host of Faith and Fandom, Finding God in Fandom, or I hope I didn't mess that up, but he can correct me if I messed up the name of that at all. So, good morning. How's it going?
Good, man.
Good. How's I don't know where you are, but how is life in your neck of the woods?
I am on the coast of North Carolina. It's hot and awkward, which is like most of us. But we're also an hour from Myrtle Beach, which is one of the biggest hot spots for everything going on in the world. So it's scared of travelers and stuff with that. But also it's one of the first times we're not just popping over to the beach whenever I'm home. So it's kind of a different situation.
Are you getting a lot of tourists yet?
Yeah. Yes. It's jam-packed. It's nothing's going on at all.
I went up and visited Lake Geneva, Wisconsin a couple weeks ago, right as the lockdowns ended, and they were jammed. You would not tell that they were in the middle of a plague just because it's clear everyone's like, okay, lockdown's over, we're going to the beach, we're going to our lake house. Hey, I get it, but there's a lot of people, and it's even in a non-disease scenario, this is an uncomfortably large number of people.
Yeah, and that's kind of been the case overall, is that no one in the tourist sector is taking anything seriously. So it just makes life weird, and you've got the polar opposites of people's opinions, where this is the worst thing ever, or this is totally fake, or whatever else, and it's just dealing with different people on different levels and how they respond to it. Just makes life interesting.
Yeah, it's messing up different people's lives at different levels too. I mean, I work in AV, and there's no AV going on right now because people aren't allowed to get together. So I'm just sitting here okay, I guess I'll restart my career the moment everyone decides they're no longer afraid of everyone else. So it gives me lots of time to work on my book. But what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
So first and foremost, I kind of wanted to talk a little about your ministry, because I know a little bit about it. I followed you on Facebook for a while, just because our circles of the internet tend to kind of correlate a little bit. I work over at Geeks Under Grace, and your Faith and Fandom, and we're kind of doing the same sort of thing. So I'm curious how you kind of got started and where it came from, and what was it an outgrowth of?
I have been going to cons, or it really anchors out of Comic-Cons as a whole. I've been going to cons for about a decade, maybe a little longer. And I'd gone for about 3 years. And in the cons that I went to, I never saw an encouraging Christian presence. The only thing I saw was, street preachers with signs condemning everyone walking in. And that was literally the only touch of gospel in the place. And I just knew that there were a lot of people that were in those circles that were believers, or that were curious about faith, or had maybe a bad taste of Christianity to think that they were not welcome or loved or anything like that. So I just kind of had it on my heart to do a ministry outreach to Comic-Cons in general. But honestly, there is one show in North Carolina. It's called Heroes Con. It's one of the biggest cons on the East Coast, but it's considered the purest show for comic book collectors. It's not a pop culture show, it's a comic book show. And so it's if you can be the biggest celebrity in the world, if you don't write comic books, they're not going to let you do anything. And so I wanted to do a one-time outreach at a Comic-Con. So I wrote my first book, just to be a devotional that I was going to have at that Comic-Con, because after being there for a few years, the thing I learned was if you just have a free stuff table, in our area at least, people wouldn't really respond other than free swag that'd probably get thrown away. If you try to evangelize without a reason to actually be there, you'll get kicked out of the show. And so like the best way that it seemed for me was that if I wanted the right to express whatever I wanted to freely, that I needed to be considered an artist like everyone else in Artist Alley. And so I wrote the book with the mindset of I'm going to write this book so that I can be in Artist Alley, so that I can have conversations with people at this con. And it was supposed to be like a one-time thing. And I was going to write that one book, do that one Comic-Con and be done. And at the first show we did, it just kind of blew up so big, so quickly that I didn't really have a chance to stop. Like, I've wanted to stop a few times, but like, God just kept opening so many doors with it that it felt like I would be in complete disobedience if I walked away when I wanted to. And that just kind of kickstarted things. That's going on 8 years now that since we started that, and it's been going ever since. And now we're let's see, 7 books and a kid's book in. Obviously not in 2020, but on average, I've been averaging about 25 cons a year.
Wow.
So it's like almost every other weekend, or sometimes multiple shows per weekend. We're at a different con, usually in the Southeast, like Tennessee, Virginia, North South Carolina, Georgia, Florida, like that chunk of the world. And then I did San Diego once. So that was outside of that, that's what we've just kind of been like the primary focus for like the last 8 years.
Is that a full-time gig for you now, or is it?
No. It could be, if that's the route we wanted to go with it. But my full-time job is a pastor.
Okay.
And I pastor a church in North Carolina, and the con ministry is always so seasonal, and it has its peaks and highs and lows and stuff like that, and really all depends on scheduling conflicts and stuff like that. If I was going to devote being gone every weekend, it could be a full-time thing, but I would much rather just use it as an opportunity for things as they rise, and just stay in my little area and do that with it. But because I feel called to be a pastor, and until that's not a thing, I probably won't try and take that full time. But also, it's a tremendous strain to be gone so much already. And though when my church hired me, they knew that Faith and Fandom was already a thing, because I've been doing Faith and Fandom 8 years. I've been at this church going on 6. So when they hired me, they knew this was a ministry that I was already doing, and that was part of the process. I was like, is this going to be a problem? And they're like, nope, we would just see this as, you doing kingdom work and try not to be gone more than 5 Sundays. And that was it. That's my full-time job. And I had planned on slowing down a little bit, but not like 2020 slowing down. So,
oh, jeez. What kind of church do you minister to?
It's a church called Vertical Church. It's on paper, it's a Baptist church, but it's one of those Baptist churches that doesn't look like a Baptist church, and you wouldn't know it unless you actually like read the paperwork.
Yeah, I've been to a few of those.
And so I pastor that one. It kind of was one of those things. I was pastoring a college church, like a church that was like right across the street from a large university in our area, and as their college pastor. And then they the Baptist State Convention asked me to plant a college church specifically for college students, or with a focus for college students. And then that was a sister church to the church I now pastor. So I planted the college church, got old, and took a different church, older. I had some guys that I was discipling under me that I felt like were going to do a better job, like future wise. And so we just kind of swapped roles. But so I've been, it's a good church. It's a good group of people. It's very ministry focused and outreach focused. And For a long time, it was a mobile church of like they met in the movie theater for years, and then a high school, and we got an actual church facility 2 years ago, and we had just finished building our facility when our whole city got flooded in a hurricane. So like the literally on Sunday we put the final little door stops down or whatever it was for like in the hallways, and then on Wednesday the whole thing was 4 feet underwater.
Oh
So,
man.
so it was a disheartening time, but it was a good time. So
Well, that's something at least. So, backing up a little, what was your walk to faith like then? If you're, it seems you come from a nerd background, obviously, but like, what was it to you? Was it something you were born into naturally? Because I mean, obviously everyone has to kind of choose to embrace it at some point. So what was that?
right.
What was that walk for you?
Um, I didn't grow up in a Christian home. Like neither of my parents were Christians. And if anybody around me was a Christian, it was I'm a Southerner, so I'm a Christian. Christian. And there are lots of those.
Well, the hillbilly elegy kind of Christianity.
Yeah. And so it really just boiled down to I was a young teenager, 13, and I kind of fell into like comic books and faith at the same time, so they were kind of like a mutual growth time. But I honestly went to this church's youth group lock-in thing because there was a cute girl in my middle school, and I
Same.
I had the mindset that if we're going to be locked in this thing for 12 hours and she's going to have to put up with me for 12 hours, I can wear her down. And was like my literal 13-year-old mindset. And I went there for that purpose, and heard the gospel, and it's just like it hit me really, really hard. And I think it was the first time I'd actually heard the actual gospel. And there's this line in the movie Almost Famous that says like the truth just sounds different. And the first time I heard the gospel, it's just like it just hit me really hard, and I started digging into it and actually started attending that church, and gave my life to Christ, went through some discipleship there, and just it was kind of like that upward tick. And then from 13 to 16, I was a typical easily distracted teenager, and then around 17 God just really got a hold of my heart, and I felt like he was calling me to missions. And I had gotten attached to a Bible camp that was being built in our area. And so I had been volunteering with some day camps they were doing. And, I was about 17. I really felt like God was calling me to go there and to be one of the first staff people at this new camp. And I did. And I went to Bible college and worked full time as a missionary at a Bible camp until I became a college pastor. So.
Okay. So you talked to we started talking about your ministry. How is it the impact kind of hit you? Like I know you obviously seem to have done a fairly good job of creating connections with people and outreach to people. How does that what has the ministry been like in terms of its effect?
One of the biggest things that I've seen is just relationships built with not just readers, but because like that was my initial mindset. That was like people will read the book and that'll be a ministry. We'll have conversations about that. Some of the biggest ministry has just been almost like being a chaplain at the cons. That artist alley people, vendors, celebrities, con attenders that are back and forth. In our area, realistically, when the world is normal, there's a con every 2 hours. Like every weekend you can go 2 hours and hit a con from where I live. And like honestly, that's just been this process of actually slowly building relationships where people can be open. Like I've had people that have sat across from me in Artist Alley for 2 or 3 years before they felt comfortable enough to even have a conversation about anything. And so I think it's been a consistency with that. But like one of the first shows I did, the vendor beside me, was very antagonistic towards God, and he had actually, his wife had died suddenly and left him with like a 6-year-old little girl to raise on his own, and he was really angry at God, and like, you know, we spent the whole weekend having conversations. A year later, we were discussing faith, and then the next time we actually ran into him, he's like leading small groups at his church, and like just being able to be plugging in with that. Or I got to do marriage counseling for one of the vendors.
Wow.
That was going through stuff. It's been really good with that, and it's been a very diverse thing of just a lot of the folks that are maybe church hurt, or maybe haven't found a church that they feel they could identify with. They'll reach out to me, and I'll get to do like, you know, to pray with them, or like point them in a better direction, stuff they could seek, or, you know, just give them some counseling. So it really has turned into kind of almost like a Comic-Con chaplaincy. Like, some cons invite me to do full Sunday morning church services, which is fantastic.
Wow.
That's, I'd say, let's just go with 2019 numbers, because that's at least consistent. Out of 25 shows, I think, in 2019, maybe 9 had actual full Sunday morning church services, where they actually let me do like full gospel presentation, everything. It would be like geek themed, but it would still be something they would roll with. So that's just kind of been a lot of that, is, you know, the interactions with that, and just being more of a chaplain presence to that culture.
Sure. I mean, I've been in and out of that culture for most of my adolescent life, because I mean, started going to Comic-Cons roughly around college. Kind of stopped about a year or two ago when I realized I needed to stop spending money on collectibles. But that culture is very different than the one you grow up when you're a church kid. Just, you know, I grew up in the pseudo-Baptist, pseudo-Methodist, pseudo-non-denominational church, where the gospel music, not even the gospel music, the pop Christian music and the hipster music leaders and all that stuff, and it's all the stuff Babylon Bee makes fun of. And you go to a Comic-Cons for the first time, and it's a completely different world. I mean, it's a lot of it's very different, like, orientation wise. It's a lot more overtly sexual. There's a lot of people who mostly grow up on in the internet, and who have kind of this shared sense of cultural, I guess I want to call it like cultural libertarianism, where everyone's just like, do what you want, just dress how you want, everyone do what they want, everyone feel good, everyone do what they want. And it's fun and it's intoxicating, but it's a very strange atmosphere, especially more as I become more Christian. I get more skeptical of it. And I don't dislike it at all. I still would go to Comic-Con if I get the chance. I think I almost went this year, but how different do you feel in that group, like, as a Christian? Like, obviously there are practicing Christians in that lot, because it's a huge, you especially if you're in, like me, and you go to Chicago ones, there's thousands of people that show up. But what is that like for you, like, going into that group?
Realistically, there's a lot of times that I might be the only Christian I actually know of that's a verbal practicing Christian. And you know, just for, you know, most of this journey of doing this, I've had a partner that has been like my sidekick through all of this. I started this in 2013, and when I was a college pastor, one of my students that was in my college church was graduating with an art degree. And so he actually kind of, as soon as he graduated, he jumped in with me. And so it's usually the two of us. He's moving to Nashville to plant a church like next month, so he'll be out of my loop. But you know, we would be the only ones that we knew of in a group. Let's say the biggest show in North Carolina has roughly like 700-800 vendors. at Heroes Con of just like Artist Alley people and things like that. And outside of like a couple people we got to know, we would be the only ones we knew were Christians going into it. And we wouldn't know it until usually when someone walked by our table and like do a double take and be like, what is that? And like usually we would get one of three reactions almost every time, where it would be the person who's not offended but also doesn't care. They just like, and just keep walking. You'd have the Christian who wasn't expecting this, and they'd see it and be like, this is great. Oh my gosh, I need to tell my youth pastor, blah, blah, whatever it was, they'd engage. And then you'd have the people who were straight up offended that we existed. And that would usually manifest in like, or like, why are you even here? And like just storming off. Out of hundreds of shows, I only had one person physically like damage my booth.
Oh my goodness.
I was at one show.
No.
I was at one show and one dude literally just grabbed my booth and flipped it. And
that's biblical in a very heretical sort of way, but
yeah, and that's the thing. Like, most of the reactions have been good. Most of the interaction with that, and it's one of the things you feel terribly isolated. And one of the things about just being an Artist Alley, period, even as not a Christian ministry, is that when you sign up for like an Artist Alley situation, you're signing up to have 30,000 people walk by your booth and judge you in a 2-second window. That when they walk by, you're going to get fully assessed on whatever you're doing in like a glance. And so it can be really discouraging, like to just sit there for hours and have people walk by and you don't know, what part of you they're disparaging. But for the most part, it's been, you can definitely tell you're in the minority. But one of the things that I love the most is that when you actually come across someone of faith in that arena, they're so happy to see you. Like, they're so happy to do that or to be involved in that. But like one of the other ends is like, there have been people who said that they requested to be by us, like next to us, so that we would start a fight with them. Not even joking.
Oh no.
I had a person that was in a very different lifestyle than, where I was am at. And they thought that if they put themselves next to the Jesus booth, we would harass them and they would be able to like get some good video content out of it. And like, it was straight up to the point where like we made it's a 3-day show that this one was at. And like by day 2, like me and my partner brought in coffee for them. We're like, hey, we brought you some coffee this morning. And they're like, well, crap. They're like, we were hoping y'all were going to be ugly and dismissive. We're like, no, we're cool. But that's one of the things is like so many people, as you mentioned, that it is a very different environment to the church environment or to even a moderate Christian environment, is that there's so many people there that expect that if the presence of God is there in any capacity, that also means that the presence of condemnation is there. And just being able to be a loving presence and support people and like literally just helping an artist break down their booth or sending somebody for a coffee run, praying with somebody when they've had a bad day, or like there'd be days where our booth would do better than actual artists, and I'll say actual artists, like people who do other things. And when we would bless them, it would freak them out. And it's just one of those things of the response is different every show. And there's some shows that like it would be that we are a welcomed guest, and then there's some shows where they would like literally put us in the tiniest broom closet they could just so they could say they gave us the chance. But I mean, overall, it's been this experience. But it's the thing where like Jesus sent out the disciples, and he's like, if they reject you, shake the dust off your sandals and go on. And there are shows that I know that we are not anybody's favorite. We're also found out that we're every parent's favorite booth. Because there's so many kids that are at these shows, like teenagers, tweens, that their parents come along because their parents are just outright terrified of what their kids are into, and they're like, "Oh, thank goodness y'all are here. I'll buy everything you have."
Oh my goodness.
And so I know we're not every teenager's favorite booth, but we're every parent's favorite booth. Because they're like, oh, maybe there's some things that, and they'll straight up say, come talk to him about One Piece, or come talk to him about like whatever they're into, and like we can have like discussions. But it's overall, it's been a good process.
That's good. Do you face any acrimony from the people who set up the cons then? Because you said that there are some cons where they just stick you in the broom closet. Do they look at you like, these guys, or do they? What are their reactions?
They're more often than not, you can't necessarily. The only way you can deny someone a vendor spot is like without opening yourself up for arbitration or anything like that is if you say that you're a curated show. Where you don't get to just sign up for a booth, you have to be voted on.
Yeah.
And I've had a couple shows where I had to go through like 5 years of voting before they let me in. But then once they let me in, they were cool. There are other shows that I could tell that like the vendors, or not the vendors, but the showrunner straight up told volunteers to keep an eye out in case we start like causing a ruckus. And
oh my.
But literally, I have not met a showrunner that had a bad experience with us or because of us, and I think that's part of like the ministry and the testimony of it is like just being there and being someone they know that they don't have to feel threatened by. That you can put us next to or across from someone who's drastically different in the way they view life, but we're not going to, ruin your Kool-Aid. I had one guy that like was beside me about a year ago, and the way my booth is set up, like I've got books on a rack right here, and I've got shirts on a rack over here, and usually I don't want people to see the backs of shirts because it's just unattractive. So I'll stick like some of our prints on the back of the shirts just to have some art. And there was one that had Iron Man with a psalm written on it, and the guy like literally walked up and ripped it off because he didn't want to see a Bible verse. And it's just like, I'm like, okay, cool, whatever. I mean, that's fine. I was like, I did respectfully say, you do realize this is my space. Like anything displayed here is space I paid for to have, and it's not violating you. It was like, but because we're neighbors and we're here for 3 days, I'll accommodate you. And like, just with that, but it's just like that literally has been the only time someone's like physically as a vendor, messed with my booth for that purpose. But overall, the people that run the shows haven't had a problem. And then honestly, there's been shows in some areas that straight capitalize on it. Like they'll be like, hey, and we have Geek Church on Sunday morning, so if you feel like you're going to miss your church, you can come on out to Geek Church. And they'll use that as a solid advertising point, because in the South, your Sunday morning sales at a con will drop because you can't miss church. But if you've got church on hand, hey, it works out well. So it's kind of balanced that way.
I'm surprised the Sunday sales would drop that much in the South. If you do have that much of a Christian culture, but when most of the people coming aren't necessarily of that, that's interesting that you would have a drop like that, I guess.
Well, I mean, they would usually like on a Sunday like that, you would see if the show opened at 10 or 11, you're not going to see a flux of people until 12 or 1.
That's kind of the same up here in Chicago, though. Like when you have the big cons that have the 3-day stuff, like Sunday is usually the day it drops off because everyone wants to go the day of or the Saturday because that's when they're off work, and by the time you get to Sunday, you're basically getting the stragglers who didn't want to pay full price for the ticket. So, but even here in Chicago, we don't have a. I don't think we're gonna have a massive loss of uptown Chicago hipsters who suddenly realize, oh no, I'm gonna be late to mass. Like that's not the demographic that's showing up to C2E2.
No, it's not. But in North Carolina, it's a little more on that end. You'll see a larger tick if you actually have an option, but I know it's not everywhere.
Have you had any massive, like, successful stories of meeting people just walking by who were taken aback by what you were doing and influenced their faith? Or because obviously if you're selling a lot of books and if you're making connections even with the vendors, and you said you do get some interaction with people, but what have you gotten any good individual cases of people that have reached out to you afterward or had their life changed by it?
Yeah, there's I don't know if I have a number to put on it, but there's been a lot of people that'll reach out just to say that this one chapter on this helped me with my faith with this. One that was literally a year ago. There's a chapter in book 2, I think. It's Nobody Stays Dead in comics, and like talking about like overcoming the fear of death or something to that effect. And I had a guy that he's a 40-year-old man whose father had passed away, and he said that he had read that chapter every day for like 2 weeks in his grieving process. Or there's one just crazy one. There's also one in that same one that was a chapter on Doctor Who and marriage, just relationships in general. And a couple from a con had me read the chapter out loud as the beginning of their wedding.
Wow.
And so like literally rolled up to a wedding, full suit and tie, and read a chapter about Doctor Who and relationships. There's been stuff like that. I've had vendor friends who've like literally rededicated their life to Christ. Just, I'm not saying that it was all me, but we were part of the discussion that God used. We've had people that, and some of it's not even just the books or stuff. Like we had someone who in just this year in February, it was the last con I did of a large scale before the world shut down. We had a young woman who drove 4 hours to this con because she liked my memes. And she said that my memes had become like the catalyst or Kickstarter to her reading the Bible. And she's like, I didn't read the Bible before, but your memes made me start. And like, but literally she drove 4 hours to tell me she liked my memes. Or people that, will catch our podcast and like say, have testimonies of stuff that comes from our podcast. And some of the other stuff has really been like involving small groups. Is that one of the things that we've done, it's like, it's not something I crazy advertise, but I'm also not afraid to advertise it, is that if anybody ever emails me and they're doing a small group or they're doing something like that, we'll straight just give them PDFs to all the books and let them use them however they want for their small groups. And we've had, I'd say at least in the last 3 years, probably 25 small groups in various places, like use our materials and just come back with like just good discussions with that. And there's been a lot of testimonies, there's been a lot of good stuff, and honestly that's just kind of stuff I really hang on to and treasure. But knowing that God is using it in ways that I either expected to or not, I never expected someone to like come up just to tell me the memes were good. Like I was like, and my 12-year-old daughter was sitting there at the booth. She's like, what? And she's like just straight up like cackling at the idea. There's a woman literally crying in front of us, and like she's laughing her head off that this lady was excited about our memes. But on the other end, this has just also been kind of one of the things I've really enjoyed is that it's helped other people jump off and do their own thing. Like pursue doing ministry either in geek culture or ministry to a demographic that they feel uniquely called to. But it's also too just been really cool just to see that how everybody does it differently, and that there's so many people swimming in the same pond, but doing things differently with that. And I also love the way, just looking at the way that God has like straight up dispersed people in different regions doing similar things, but like we rarely interact just because.
I've seen those. There was a guy who showed up to Anime Central a couple years ago who was giving away posters of Gamer Jesus, which was Jesus dressed up in a Street Fighter uniform, and he was
Yes.
handing out little pamphlets, like those little like beginner's guide to the Bible pamphlets.
Hmm.
I wish I brought it in here. I have it. I still have it somewhere, but
Dude, I have it. I have it right here. This one?
yeah, I have that.
This was Game Church's thing.
So you know those guys, or?
I do. I know a lot of who they used to be. Like they Love Thy Nerd birthed out of that. Game Church was around for a long while, especially in the California region. But that was their deal. Was they gave out these Gospel of Johns with this stuff and lanyards that said Jesus loves gamers and stickers and stuff like that. And that's the thing. Like didn't interact with. I'd never met them in person, but I met them online. Or like there's a dude. I guess he's more near your region. Eric Anderson, who also writes geeky Bible studies, and we've never, in the years we've been doing this, never like ended up at the same show or anything like that. Until like 2 years ago, we both ended up at Dragon Con, and like we hung out, got dinner, and I was like, "Hey, cool, good talk." And that's like we've never done that, but I have the only like territorial thing I've ever run up on with that is there's a couple in Eastern Tennessee that run a nerd church, and they are the rightful owners of nerd ministry in Eastern Tennessee. Not like that they are going to kick you out of doing it, but they're like,
I was gonna say they're like the Baptist mafia. Break your legs if you come into their territory, but
it's not that. But you're gonna show up and realize, oh yeah, I'm not really needed here. It's like every Eastern Tennessee show I've ever been to, they're there, and they're the sweetest people. They're the family, or they're the Spakes is their last name, and they give out bumper stickers and cups, and they're so sweet and they're so kind. But it's like, literally you realize I'm not needed here. I should be at a con where there's not another presence like this. But and one of the fun things is at least 2 of the shows in Tennessee I've done, they stick us side by side so they can put all the Jesus stuff together so people can avoid it.
Oh man.
But there's one show we actually did where they put us side by side and they put us at the entrance. So we were the first booth you hit when you walked in. So I was like, okay, I'll take it. But it really is just unique to see the way that individuals respond to it. And, there's been people that have just been really cool in terms of it ministered to them in ways I didn't expect, and they've let me know about it. Or I'll straight up see reviews or something online of stuff I never expected. And then I've had some really interesting, like, celebrity conversations that I didn't see coming. Like, Brent Spiner, like Data, Star Trek, just, like, walked up to my booth, was like, "This is amazing," and started taking photos and walked away. And, like, I'm like, okay.
Is Brett Spiner religious?
I have no idea.
I know he passed away this year, but I don't.
No, he's here. He's alive. He's kicking.
Is he? I heard someone from the original Star Trek cast died this year. I don't know who it was.
Yeah, not him. He's actually on the new show Picard. He's alive and well.
He was. Yeah. I'm gonna look this up while you're talking because I want to figure out who it was.
I want to say it was Man, I don't remember, but it was somebody. You're right. Somebody from Star Trek did pass. It wasn't him. But then like I had a friend who I'm very passionate about Doctor Who. I actually named my youngest kid after a Doctor Who character. And River Song is my favorite Doctor Who character. And I was at a con with Alex Kingston, who plays River Song. And I was not about to bother her with like my books or anything. But then like somebody else in line said, "Hey, that guy over there writes books and he wrote a Bible study about you. Would you like them?" And she's like, "Yes." And she like flagged me over, and I got to go bring her the books and like have a conversation with her. Now I know that she is not about that life, but she took the books and was thankful. River Tam Summer Glau from Serenity actually requested them. So that was a good experience. I gave Zachary Levi a copy of one that had a Chuck Bible study in it, and because he used to do church plants or a house church, and in California, and we talked about that. I've had some good interactions with that, and like I'm not trying to be a celebrity evangelist. I don't think you can. I know that that's a thing for some folks, but I don't think you can really change someone's whole life in a 30-second window per se.
No, I mean even the celebrity evangelist thing is kind of a compromised state to begin with. I mean, you're either Billy Graham or you're Joel Osteen, and I'm sure you know what that means.
Yes. And that's the thing is, like, if I can be like a drop of water on some soil that's planted, cool, but I don't expect to change your life. But I've had good interactions with it, and just some good experiences with it. But that's the thing. Like, the main reason I keep going with this is because of the interactions and the changes I've seen, and just stuff that God's done that I never expected.
I'm sure. I'm curious about. You've been talking a lot about the books. I'm gonna have to confess I have not had the time to read them yet, because you will notice the book pile behind my head.
Completely.
My actual book pile is about 4 times that size, and it's been that way for months. I have that horrible curse of being someone who loves to read but loves buying books more than he loves to read. So
fair enough.
I'm gonna get it eventually. I do want to read it, but I'm curious what your approach to writing them is, because I've done similar things to what I understand what you do. I wrote a series for Geeks Under Grace called Flawed Faith that was all about trying to kind of parse through religious themes in non-religious nerd culture stuff. And a lot of that was my kind of parsing through culture and growing in my own faith, understanding how you can find religious themes in these things that are implicitly non-religious or occasionally even anti-religious. I've done a couple of controversial films. So what is your approach to approaching pop culture? Like, what are your priorities, and how do you draw faith from them?
Well, one of the big things, I make sure I make it clear that I'm not implying that these are the themes that are intended, unless they are the themes that are intended. But honestly, it's, if I am watching, reading, playing, whatever entertainment I'm engaging in, if it speaks to me or encourages me in some spiritual way, like to a parallel of scripture, something like that, I usually just make note of that, and we'll spend some time writing it out, almost like an essay or a sermon, if I were to preach it or to write it out in that capacity. It's just really usually essay format of just things that I drew from it personally. And it's probably very similar to what you're saying as well. Like, I know some people do it a lot more from the intellectual, breaking down of that point. Mine's legit like, hey, this part in this movie was a lot like this that was in scripture, and it spoke to me like this, but just a lot wordier. Like whenever people like approach the booth, and like I have my like 30-second sales pitch that I have people like, Faith and Fandom is a book series, like that stuff. Usually they're like, well, what's it like? Usually the one thing I hit them with is I'll say, have you seen episode 7? And because usually that's the one thing that everybody's connected on. And so I was like, all right, the scene where Kylo Ren is walking across the bridge on Starkiller Base. I think was that the one in the first one, Starkiller Base?
Yes, he has the confrontation with Han on the bridge.
Yeah, I just couldn't remember if that one was Starkiller Base, because I didn't remember what the next one was called. So he's on Starkiller Base. He's walking across the bridge, and Han calls out to him, and he calls out to him as Ben. He had already told Leia, our son's too far gone, we can't help him. But he went to a place where he knew that it was going to probably get him killed. When he called out to him by his actual name, not the identity he put on himself. And even after he was betrayed, he still, reached out in like grace and compassion and touched his face, that he wasn't even bitter towards him that way. And I was like, I'd just simply say, like, that's a lot like how God is with us, and the fact that we're too far gone by most people's standards. That when he calls out to us, he calls out to us as his child, not by the identities we've thrown on ourselves, and that, you know, coming to save us required sacrifice, and but it was worth making, and he still shows us compassion even though we betray him often and over and over. And so that's usually when someone asks what's it's like, that's what I would tell them, but just a lot wordier. And my editor says I've gotten way too wordy over the last few years. So it was one of those things that when I wrote the first book, I had no writing experience. Like, it was literally, I had done kids summer camp and that was about it. Maybe a little college ministry. As soon as the first book went out, like less than 2 months later, I got hired by Screen Junkies and Clever Movies to be one of their screenwriters. So by the time the book came out in January, my first con was in June. So by the time I published the book and made it my first con, I'd already been a screenwriter for like 3 or 4 months. And but I wrote 130 episodes of content for them, where I was getting like critical notes of like, fix this, fix this, fix this. And so like writing 2 scripts a week for 3 years was like, okay, my writing had to get better quickly. So that was just one of those things. But that was just a cool thing, is that one of the producers at Clever Movies saw the book, bought it, liked my nerd knowledge, not even necessarily spiritual content, but liked that I actually knew what I was talking about. So they hired me to be their geek on hand. So whenever they had a script about something geeky, it just went to me and I handled that. And that actually helped me with cred as far as Comic-Cons as well, because nobody cared if the geeky Bible study guy was here. But, you know, if we can get a screenwriter from Screen Junkies and Clever Movies, hey. It was originally Clever Movies, and then Screen Junkies bought it, and so my content went with that. But it's just one of those things of the writing. I feel like it's gotten better over time, and it's also helped me, honestly, like with sermon writing and stuff as a pastor. So it's been good.
Yeah, it helps to have creative limitations thrown at you very quickly, and to have someone who's willing to sit down with you and kind of just be like, hey, this doesn't work, this doesn't work, this doesn't work. I mean, that hasn't been a luxury I've had in my writing career quite yet. So I've either bumped into the people that are like, oh, cool, this is good, we're just going to publish it, and then I have to look at it later and there's like 8 spelling mistakes that I didn't notice the first draft. Or you get the other half where it's like, this is awful, we can't publish this, rewrite it from the ground up. So
it's like the first one was like straight up a rookie effort that was only supposed to exist at one con. And so, you know, I wrote it like only one weekend's worth of people's ever going to see this. And now it's like the thing I've sold the most. And I'm like, oh no, I don't even carry it to cons. Like at cons, I have books 2 and up. They're like, where's book 1? You can get it on Amazon later, but you know, you should try these first. And I stand by it, but it's that early editing. And then like, there's stuff that, you know, sometimes like if your editor gets too familiar with your voice, they'll let you get away with stuff that you shouldn't. And I did a thing where I did a voting thing on my page of what chapter from another book would you like me to record as a podcast or record audio of. And somebody mentioned one to me, and so I went to record it, and I'm like, who let me say this? And I'm like, because I said something dumb and like borderline, like, me now finds it offensive versus me 3 years ago probably thought it was hilarious. And I'm like, who let me? And I literally called my editor. I'm like, why did you let me say this? And he's like, it was funny. I'm like, no.
Oops.
So.
But yeah, we've been going for about an hour now. Do you want to talk about it? Is there anything else you want to talk about regarding your ministry, or do you want to just kind of plug your stuff and call it a day for now?
Let's see. I think the biggest thing, just as far as like the ministry of it, really has been just helping people to see that they don't have to isolate the thing. They don't have to be like a duality to it. They don't have to like become two different people. Because one of the biggest things that I've seen like people struggle with, especially Christians or people that are trying to get close to God, that are also passionate about anything else, like anime, video games, comic books, whatever, is like that they can't be both. And that they feel like I have to hide this part of me to be this person that I'm supposed to be. And I think some of the most productive conversations I've had has been really just helping people to come to terms with you are who you are, and the stuff that you're passionate about is, fine. If you're not sinning, if you're not like straight up causing spiritual damage to your life, you don't have to like hide that. And anything you would ever have to hide is not something that you need to cling to. That's just been a reoccurring conversation that's happened more often than I can count. But yeah, that's just been a big thing. And like, it's been really cool to just see how this plays out in like the real world, because like my church gives two poops about this. Like, they don't care at all. It's just like, they don't care.
He's got his hobby on the side, but you got a church, so.
There are people in my church that love it, but like, we didn't even mention it like at all. Like when the book got published, we're like, let's just leave it alone. But that's the thing of too, I know my audience. And one of the things that I had to find, and when I was starting all this stuff, is your fan base is probably not going to be your friend base. Like, if you feel like the people that are going to respond to your stuff are going to be the people that are already friends with you, it's probably not going to happen. It's like the whole where Jesus said a prophet gets no honor in his hometown. It's like the people that already know you probably aren't going to respect what you do or care. The people that find you and actually click with it, they're probably a lot more likely to be on that. And which is like, just looking at the numbers of people who like our page versus the people who are my friends, it's like small comparison. I don't have anything specific else.
I know you just released your 7th book, so I thought you'd want to give that a quick plug, but
sure. So book 7 just dropped, and it's on Amazon. It's called Faith and Fandom 7, the final book until the next one. Because I get away with dad jokes in my titles. My editor told me I'm officially not allowed to have any more stupid titles. Because like book 2 was like the obligatory sequel. Book 4 was like episode 4, a new book. Book 5 was insert clever subtitle. It's just, and I think book 6 was look, another one. I mean, so my editor told me I'm not allowed to have another stupid title. So but it is the 7th book in the series, but none of the books are in a particular sequential order. Each one stands on its own, and it really does just depend on what you're interested more in and what time frame of pop culture you're more into, because this one deals a lot more with like the last year, minus like Firefly and Phineas and Ferb. Those two eked their way into it. Everything else is like 2018 and 2019. There's stuff from recent Batman runs. There's stuff from recent movies and TV series and things like that. But it's encouraging. One of the things that I think one of my favorite things in 7 was I did a chapter on church hurt with Ahsoka Tano from Clone Wars, and just like dealing with some of her situation with the Jedi Council, and it was really cathartic for me. Like just writing that, it was painful, but it was good. And I think that's one of the things. It's like, I think this stuff will hit different people at different seasons. So if you're interested in the books, you can pick up book 7 or wherever you're really into. Jump into them. They're all on Amazon. They're all on Kindle. And if you're doing small groups or anything like that, just hit me up and I'll give you PDFs if you want to share those around. We also have a podcast, kind of taking like the past month off just because I was doing book production. And but that's, can't really do a lot of Comic-Con announcements, so that's just where that's at. And apparently I've got good memes if you want to follow me on our Facebook page.
All right. Thank you so much for coming on. It was fun to talk with you.
Absolutely, dude.
Sure thing. God bless. Have a good day.
You too.
The AntiSocial Network is a Groupthink Productions podcast. Editing, producing, and hosting are by Tyler Hummel, artwork by Crystal Calley, and original music was composed by Melissa Lafira and the late Dan Smolla. Like, subscribe, and please let us know what you think about the show in the comments below if you'd like to see anyone interesting be a guest on the show. Thank you for listening.